Hi and welcome everyone. I'm totally blasted. We so far have way more than 2000 views of my last video, which seems to me that it is the right direction to go with more beginner videos in the starter series. And today we will talk about some basics. We won't program, but we have to take a look into a lot of basics. And that's what we're going to do today. So before I continue, thanks again for all the people who watched the video. It would be awesome if you could leave a subscription. Today we will talk about ExtJS basics. And you already see that I come up with a list. The last time we created a workspace, our first app. And we were talking about a lot of these basics so that you right away can start. Today I would like to give you the tools to where to find more information, what ExtJS is meant to be, what it is not meant to be, and all these things. So let's dive right into it. I created some information in here. What exactly is ExtJS and where's the difference to Angular, React, stuff like that? ExtJS, first of all, is a framework, which means that you can do everything inside this tool. Just use ExtJS from the start to the beginning, and you do not have to include any other third-party tools to get routing or something like that. It's all included. If you want to add more sources, third-party tools, you can, and you can even define if everything should be wrapped up in a single file or if you want to use different files. We'll go into that over the time, but for now, just keep my word that it is possible. ExtJS comes out of the box with 140 components, whatever that means. We will look into that today. What is SPA? What does SPA mean? SPA means single page application. So you download everything at once, your full application at once. And afterwards, you only receive data. And whenever you go to a different subview, it's already loaded. You just have to add these data. And once you do not need the page anymore, you would just remove it via JavaScript and add a new view via JavaScript. And that way you never reload your application. You stay inside a single loading of your application. That's single page application. A lot of people think that this might create a monolith, which means that you load everything at once. Whereas if you have micro apps, that you load always only this single mini application. Might be that you have a dashboard, and from the dashboard you choose the application what you would like to do right now. And if you leave that mini application, you go back to the dashboard and so on. You can do the same thing with ExtJS. If you want to do that, you just create a lot of packages, and on the fly you load the different packages, which are the different micro applications, and that way you might go the same way. In this tutorial, using packages that way is more advanced, but in these beginner tutorials we will go with this monolith way. But let me just tell you, because in ExtJS, you're just loading the application once, and afterwards you have a caged application on your device. If you reload the application, you use the caged application. During development, not, but for the end user, yes. So I do not really see that problem for us. If over time we will create more application, huger applications, then we might go for this packaging thing. The next question is modern versus classic. The thing is that in the beginning there was Classic. Then they created a Sencha Touch version, and this went back and forth, and now we have Modern versus Classic. Modern uses the CSS way to lay out everything on the screen, while Classic positions everything absolute, and ExtJS has to know exactly where which item is to restyle everything. For the modern way, it's that the browser via CSS restyles everything and relayouts everything, while Classic always has to run the JavaScript way to reposition everything and so on. That's why we will in here use the modern part, but Classic is not that far apart. So if you're working with a Classic application, it's almost the same. You as a developer won't really see the differences, but the framework and the browser, they definitely know the difference. So for us as beginner class, it won't matter if you're using modern or classic. Most of the commands are the same. There are slight differences. I might from time to time point out some differences, but overall you can use everything for everything. Even using classic for, let's say, for a tablet works out of the box perfectly. So the next one is about the ExtJS parts. And I would like to start with layout. And I will explain to you what layout is, and then I will open the first source that I will show you to you today. So the first layout is, the definition of layout is that layout part is that part of ExtJS which organizes how the items on the screen are positioned next to each other, underneath, and so on. The layouts at the same time are responsible if you use animations to slide in things, slide out, pop up things. That's usually part of the layout. Now, before I open this, let's just search for it so that you know your way how to get there. If I go in here and say Sencha ExtJS Kitchensink, somewhere on the top you get Kitchensink. Just remember that there are different versions, 6.2, 6.0, 7.1. So I'm going for the 7.1 version. And the next difference is that initially this will be classic. So we head over these 3 lines all the way to the bottom and we mark the modern toolkit. Now everything will be reloaded for the modern toolkit. Remember, it's almost the same for classic and modern. Now let's go into components, and inside components here you find layouts. So that's the first thing we are going to look into. Everything is pretty easy to understand in here. So let's start with the flex layout, flex box layout. If you're ever looking for the flex layout, the hbox and vbox, just search the internet for flex and layout, and you definitely will find a lot of other examples. And in here you can right away see how this works. The hbox layout will be that the parent with the hbox layout is 100%. Then the first thing is that each item inside with a fixed width, like in here with 100, will be deducted from the full width. The rest will be evenly divided between everything with a flex. And this will be divided as follows. You just count up 1 plus 2 makes 3. And this takes 1/3 and this takes 2/3. And how many items you have, it's always the same. First, deduct whatever you have as a fixed width, and then divide everything by the number, the total number of flex values. So let's go for the next one, which is the hbox. The hbox, oh sorry, a vbox. The vbox is the same, just underneath each other. Again, height 100 will be deducted, and then flex 1 plus flex 2, 3, 1/3, 2/3, and that's how this will be counted. The next one is the form layout, which is used to style forms so that each form inside will always take up to 100% in width, and that the labels will always end at the same position. You can see in here that this takes a lot more, and this one even takes more, and this is, but always the labels take up the same width. The next one is our card layout. In here you can see this is our card layout. There are just tabs on top, and there are 3 cards next to each other. And pressing the tabs launches the animation. I was talking about that earlier, that the layout usually takes the responsibility for the animation. And in here, everything inside, note that up to component dot, this whole area is a single card. And we're just exchanging cards, so now the second card is in the view, and now the third card is inside the view. There are ways to destroy things once they get off screen, but this is just the card layout. All the other card layouts are not really important for us right now. There is a center layout, which we do not care right now. So inside components, we do have a lot of different components. We'll take a look into that just in a bit. Utilities. Utilities are something that goes from you would like to format your string using xutil format. And typically inside the documentation, let me just open the documentation. So docs, let's go with this one, API. And now I just scroll down to util. So everything inside here are util functionalities. It may be the history of your browser state. It may be sortable, to sort data, task manager, and so on. Task manager is very powerful and cool. So a lot of things in here are just awesome. And especially this xutil format, you will definitely want to know what that is. But give us some time, we will definitely use this. And if you're right now interested, I will add another video on top here, which goes more into this formatting stuff for the renderer and so on. So then we have data, and a lot of data that is basically where you receive the data, you transform them into stores and use the stores to bind them to a grid or something else, so that it's very easy for us to display the data which we receive, and we may want to filter them, we may want to sort them, and all this stuff goes into data, which is up here. So out of the box, you can see there's something like a reader, there's something like a proxy, there's an operation though. So this definitely is an HTTP connect somewhat operation. And you have different ways to connect. It may be simple, let me just go to proxy. You may have an IAX call or an xdirect call, which is very powerful. Most of the users in ExtJS don't even know about it, but it's very, very powerful. Local storage, memory. Memory is something, if you just want to keep the data as long as the application is alive, you use the memory store. If you have a local storage and you use data to be stored in there, you can just go with that one. So there are a lot of different things and really strong ones in this data package. So the next one, style. You do have inside here my application. Let me just show my application. All these, SCSS ones. Yeah, this is a way to instantly restyle the full application. If you go with $base color and you change that to let's say green, then all of a sudden your complete application will be restyled in green. And you get a lot of these tools. If I take a look in the documentation, I was in the documentation, and let's go for button. Button is always a cool thing to look into. Let me just go here for button, next button, load that, and up here you have all these UI styles, which is a combination of a lot of different parts to restyle your button, like make it light or dark, which is invert or not. And you have the option to reset different things. Let's just say that you're going for the button color. You could set the button color in here. Or if you want to have a different icon color on pressed, you can just set that one in here too. So you would just take this button pressed icon color, add it into here, and you're fine to go. At the same time, you can use the themer for that. We might go into that. I'm not yet sure, but this is one part to set all these variables in here in a single place. Okay, so this was the style part. Now, let's talk about a pattern. ExtJS supported with Classic the MVC pattern up to version 6. Then they switched to MVVM, M, model, view, view model. And this is a big change from model, view, controller. Up to that point, the controller played a huge role in the way you code your stuff. You always had to say, okay, go to that button and switch the icon on that one to a thumbs up. All of a sudden, using the view model a lot more, you can just bind the icon to the view model, and whenever something changes, the view model will change, and right away the display will change. So the view model plays a huge role all of a sudden, and that's what I will support in here too. I will try to get most of the things bound to the view model so that we can play with that a lot. Okay, so in addition, it also contains custom rule routing, which is more part of ExtJS than of the style. I will go into this routing and history a lot later on. Now I'm back to the components. You remember these 140 components and containers and what is what? Let's go back to our kitchen sink. In our kitchen sink, we do have even these calendar, charts, trees, grids. They just took these apart from the components, though they are components, because they wanted to push their grid a bit more. But overall, they are also components. Calendar, for example, just for the priority users of you who paid more money, you will get the calendar, like pivot grids and stuff like that. So now diving back into the components, we have a lot of components. If you go through these, you will find a lot of cool features. Just going for the button, you most likely know the basic button. In here, you all of a sudden see that they look totally different. And all of these differences can be done by adding a UI. I was going over this UI thing earlier when I mentioned, okay, in your button, you do have all these different UI thingies. You can create these awesome styles with them. And throughout your application, just use the config UI with a name and get all these different ones in here. If you're interested in how it's done, just go to details. And here you can see the original code used for this view. But buttons are not just the standard button, you also have the split buttons. Split buttons, in here you have small, and on the side you have a drop down, which is a split button. And you could also have the segmented button, which gives you the option to have these pressed states on one button and the non-pressed state on the other two. Then just go through and play with all these different items, and feel free to use drag and drop, which is more a functionality than a component. And whenever you write your own applications, just go in here and let's say, okay, I would like to have groups in here. So you can see I can drag and drop these, and what happens to them, and color-wise, what happens to them. And just grab the details for yourself. In here you see controller, and a lot of things are done in the controller. Make sure that you always look up here to find more information. And this is just a simple drag and drop. You can see that this one is created by adding a new drag source. And it's just saying, okay, get me the element. And constrain means you can't leave that part to the view element, my full view. And just add a listener to it to drag move and drag end so that you get different information in here. And that's basically how you can easily find out, get a starting point for your personal application. Let's go back here again to my button. If you want to create a segmented button like this, just go to the details and say, okay, X type is a segmented button. Then I have 3 options. The second one should be initially pressed and you're good to go. That way you just copy paste this part, add it to your personal code, and you have a segmented button. So let's go back to our components, close the details in here. Is there anything else really? Oh yeah, I was going over the next thingy, data-bound views. Data-bound views, a lot of things data-bound are the grids, and I will just cover here the basic grid functionality. So in here you can see out of the box we get a grid, and it already has a company name, a price, which most likely is formatted as a price because the data are only $59.47. The dollar comes from somewhere else. And to make it green, to have these action items, again, just go in here and you will find all the information. Make sure that you understand what a store is with the model, and that you see that there are some rendered parts in here. So render change, render percentage, render sign. All these are used inside our view. So within the columns, you can see This is a formatter we talked about earlier, renderer. So the renderer will be inside our controller. How this works, we will cover that in a later tutorial. So render change, take a look in the controller, render change, we saw that here. This returns for each line, it receives a value and it will return this value in this format. And that's it. So this is pretty easy. And you will be able to do exactly all of this at the end of our series. And going to all components, we were in data view. So all these are data bound too. And like lists are data bound too. We get some data and we know, okay, we just want to place a single item in here. You could CSS style it and receive a completely different style for each line. We will do some things like that during the class. So this is data bound. Maps and media. So we do have media like playing an audio or playing a video. Press here, it runs, stop. And all this is explained in the details again. You will get everything you need and it just extends the Ext video. It gets an URL, it says loop true and the poster URL. And you can just go into Ext video to fully understand it. Say in here, we're looking for video. It says Ext video. And you just type in here poster URL and you will automatically understand what that is. Looking for more poster information, just enter poster, show poster on pause. Yeah, defaults to true. And all these information are available from these two pages. Just opening the Kitchensink, copy pasting the code to understand fully, go to the documentation and search for the configs. So going back here, we talked about the media. And the next one, maps. You do have basic map support, and this is Google Maps. And due to their new earlier, you could use Google Maps API for free. Now you do have to have an API key, and since then you can't always just use your person stickers. So that's why this is a bit limited in here. But I guess if you want to implement your map, it's a good starting point to right away figure out, okay, Google Map, let me just copy this and going to my help, Google Map, and you see ExtJS Google Map. All these ExtJS parts started out to be third-party tools. So if we go in here, you can see UX and all these color pick, event, Google stuff are some kind of third-party thingies. So if you want to write your own library item, you most likely will end up using the UX folder too. Okay, what else? We already talked about MVC, so we talked about data views and media, all these things. Just make sure that you search for Sencha ExtJS Kitchensink. Make sure that you're looking not for the 6.2, but for the version number which you're currently using. 7.4 is pretty close. In your up here, you can always go for, try to search for. This is classic, doesn't matter right now, examples, and you can change the version number in here. So if I'm looking for 7.5.1, I can just press enter and you will get the 7.5.1 version. Then changing to the modern toolkit, if you're working with a modern toolkit. And from here, most likely go to components and search for the component you're looking for. And that's it for today. Thanks a lot for watching. If you think that you could use anything of it, I would be glad if you would leave an abo. And please leave me some comments below so that I know that I'm on the right track with how I'm doing this workshop. And with that, I wish you a great weekend.